The Academy warned us humans were physically impressive. Nobody mentioned she could bend in half, outrun every species alive and call it a warm-up. Let me start by saying that I, Calyx of Vrelia Prime, have never been what you'd call athletically inclined. My 3 legs are perfectly adequate for getting from the dormitory to the cafeteria, thank you very much, and my twin hearts, while perhaps not winning any endurance medals, have kept me alive for 23 cycles without complaint. I was perfectly content with my mediocre performance in physical education at the Galactic Academy, sliding by with barely passing marks and absolutely zero shame about it. That contentment died exactly 4 solar rotations ago. It died in Conference Room 7. To be specific, when Dean Thorpax made an announcement that sent ripples of horror through every species present except apparently the administration. The Galactic Academy, in all its infinite wisdom and spectacular lack of survival instinct, had approved an exchange program with Earth. Earth, the Death World, whose very name makes seasoned space travelers check their life insurance policy. And they weren't just accepting human students into our literature classes or mathematics seminars. Oh no, that would be too reasonable, too safe. Instead, they were integrating them into every program, including, and I cannot stress this enough, physical education. My roommate, a Clinthian named Rez with 6 delicate arms and skin that bruises if you look at it too hard, actually fainted, just straight up collapsed when Dean Thorpax explained that we'd be sharing gymnasium facilities with an actual genuine certified human from Earth. The dean had to pause his presentation while medical staff revived Rez with mineral salts and reassuring pheromones. It didn't help much. Rez spent the next 2 days researching transfer protocols to other institutions. The rumors about humans had been circulating through the Academy ever since the Galactic Council made first contact with their planet 5 cycles ago. Terrifying rumors. Horrifying rumors. Rumors that I had dismissed as exaggeration because surely no species could actually be that ridiculous and still survive. They come from a death world with gravity so intense that it would crush most species flat within minutes. Their planet is covered in dihydrogen monoxide, a substance so corrosive it dissolves metal, and they're mostly made of the stuff. They consume chemical toxins for recreation, things that would kill a Vrelian in seconds, and call it spicy food or coffee or alcohol. They have persistence predator biology, which means they literally chase their prey until it dies from exhaustion. Who does that? What kind of species wins fights by simply refusing to stop? And their healing factor. Oh, their healing factor. Apparently, if you injure a human badly enough, their body just decides to get stronger in that exact spot. Break a bone? It grows back denser. Tear a muscle? It repairs itself with extra fibers. They get damaged and come back more dangerous. That's not biology. That's a nightmare with a cardiovascular system. But surely, I had thought, surely these stories were embellished, exaggerated through repeated telling. The Galactic Council wouldn't actually put students in physical proximity to something that dangerous. Right? Wrong. So incredibly spectacularly wrong. The announcement specified that the human student, who would be arriving within the week, had specifically requested to participate in all standard physical activities. Not modified activities, not specially designed safe activities, standard activities, the same exercises that left me wheezing and trembling, the same gymnasium that had safety rails installed for the Porthene students who could barely manage 0.3 standard gravities. Professor Kill, our physical education instructor and a Horthax with 4 powerful legs built for his species' moderate gravity world, actually looked nervous when he addressed us the day before the humans' arrival. Professor Kill, the same being who once casually lifted a 500-unit weight bar with one arm. Nervous. Class, he said, his tail twitching in a way I'd never seen before. I want to emphasize that humans, while physiologically impressive, are not inherently aggressive. The student joining us has been briefed on proper safety protocols. There's no reason for panic. Rez raised one trembling arm. Professor, is it true that humans can dislocate their joints voluntarily and then just put them back? Well, some humans have greater joint flexibility, yes, and they can hold their breath for multiple minutes even though they're obligate breathers. That question came from Scylla, a Drenthian whose species could barely manage 30 seconds without their methane mixture. Technically accurate, however. Professor, I heard myself saying, my voice squeaking higher than intended. Is it true they evolved throwing things as a hunting strategy, like their shoulders are specifically designed to launch projectiles with lethal force? Professor Kill's tail was doing a full anxiety spiral now. Class, please. Yes, Humans have unusual capabilities by our standards, but this student is here to learn. Just like all of you, we will take appropriate precautions. The gravity settings will be carefully monitored. Emergency medical staff will be on standby. Everything will be fine. Everything will be fine, he said. Everything will be fine. Narrator's note for those listening. When someone says everything will be fine while their species-specific anxiety tells are firing on all cylinders, everything is decidedly not going to be fine. The human was scheduled to arrive at our physical education class the following morning. I spent that entire night lying in my sleeping pod, staring at the ceiling, wondering if my life insurance covered Deathworlder-related incidents. Probably not. Insurance companies aren't stupid. Vez didn't sleep at all. I could hear him in the adjacent pod frantically researching human behavior patterns on his data tablet. Every few minutes he'd make a small distressed sound. Around the third hour past midnight he whispered into the darkness. "Kelix, did you know they have a game where they just run into each other at full speed on purpose? It's called rugby. They do it for fun." I didn't answer. What could I possibly say to that? Tomorrow, a human would walk into our gymnasium. A being from a world so hostile that every other planet in the galaxy was classified as a vacation destination by comparison. A creature whose idea of physical education probably involved dodging actual predators and climbing mountains during their equivalent of lunch breaks. And I, Kelix of Vrelia Prime, whose greatest athletic achievement was successfully completing a low-gravity obstacle course without vomiting, would be sharing floor space with them. What could possibly go wrong? The gymnasium at Galactic Academy was designed to accommodate 17 different species with wildly varying environmental needs. It had adjustable gravity zones, atmosphere regulators, and enough safety equipment to supply a small military operation. That morning, it felt more like a bunker than a gym. I arrived early, which was absolutely not my usual style. So did everyone else apparently. Rez was already there, huddled with Scylla and a Porthian student named Vix, whose species had all the structural integrity of wet paper. We looked like a support group for the terminally anxious. "Maybe they'll cancel," Vix whispered, their translucent skin flickering with nervous bioluminescence. "Maybe the human changed their mind." "Humans don't change their minds," Rez said grimly, still clutching his data tablet like a security blanket. "I read 17 research papers last night. Persistence is literally their primary survival trait. Once they commit to something, they just keep going until reality gives up and lets them win." Professor Kuhl entered through the main doors, and I noticed he'd worn his protective teaching gear, the full set. The set he usually reserved for demonstration days involving projectile exercises. That definitely made me feel better. By which I mean worse. Significantly worse. "Good morning, class," he announced, his voice doing that forced cheerful thing that educators do when they're absolutely not feeling cheerful. "Today we have a new student joining us. I expect all of you to be welcoming and respectful. Remember, humans are people just like us. They simply come from a planet with different environmental parameters." "Different is one way to put it," I muttered. Rez made a sound that might have been a laugh or a whimper, possibly both. Professor Kuhl cleared his throat. "Before our new classmate arrives, let's review safety protocols. First, if anyone feels uncomfortable or unsafe at any point, you are encouraged to move to a designated rest zone. Second, all gravity settings will be clearly marked. Do not, under any circumstances, enter a zone calibrated for a gravity level higher than your species' tolerance. Third, the gymnasium doors opened. We all froze, every single one of us. 17 different species with completely different biology, all managing the exact same reaction of pure primal terror. The human walked in. Her name, as Professor Kill nervously introduced her, was Jamie Chen. She was, by human standards according to my frantic pre-class research, average height, which meant she was absolutely towering compared to my species. She had dark hair pulled back in something called a ponytail, brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, and she was smiling, actually smiling, like this was a normal situation and not a diplomatic incident waiting to happen. "Hey everyone," Jamie said, her voice friendly and completely at odds with the fact that she was a walking apex predator. "Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here." Excited. She was excited. We were terrified, and she was excited. From my perspective, humans looked wrong in a way that was hard to articulate. They had forward-facing eyes, predator eyes, designed for tracking prey with binocular vision. Their teeth, which I could see when she smiled, included those pointed canines built for tearing meat, and the way she moved. Even just walking casually across the gymnasium floor had this efficiency to it. No wasted energy. Every motion deliberate. Like watching a hunting cat, if hunting cats were bipedal and could discuss philosophy. Let's start with introductions, Professor Kill suggested, and I could hear the strain in his voice. Go around, share your name and home planet. We did. It was painful. Everyone's voices were at least an octave higher than normal. When it got to me, I managed to squeak out, Kelix, Vrelia Prime, and Jamie nodded enthusiastically. Nice to meet you, Kelix, she said, and I nearly jumped. She'd remembered my name. After one introduction, human memory retention was terrifying. When introductions finished, Jamie raised her hand. Professor Kill, I just want to say, I know my physiology might seem a bit intense compared to some species here. If anyone's uncomfortable, I totally understand. I promise I'm not here to make anyone nervous. I just really love physical fitness, and I'm excited to learn how other species approach exercise. She loved physical fitness. Of course she did. Her species chased animals to death for fun before they invented agriculture. Loving physical fitness was probably genetic. That's very considerate, Jamie, Professor Kill said. Now then, let's begin with warm-up stretches. Everyone find a comfortable spot on the floor. We'll start with basic flexibility exercises. We spread out across the gymnasium, and I made sure to position myself as far from Jamie as possible while still technically being in the class. Rez did the same. So did Scylla. Actually, there was a very noticeable empty radius around the human, like she had her own gravitational field of terror. If Jamie noticed, she didn't show it. She just found a spot, sat down cross-legged with disturbing ease, and waited for instructions with that same friendly smile. Professor Kill activated the wall display showing the first stretch position.
We'll begin with a simple seated forward fold. Extend your primary ambulatory limbs and reach toward your extremities. Hold for 10 counts.
I bent forward about 15 degrees, which was my maximum range before my spine started filing formal complaints. Beside me, Rez managed slightly better with his more flexible Clinthian structure. Then I made the mistake of glancing at Jamie. She had folded completely in half. Completely. Her torso was flat against her legs, her arms extended past her feet, and she looked comfortable. Like this was a resting position. Like her skeleton was merely a suggestion rather than a rigid support structure. Oh great, Rez whispered beside me. They're made of rubber. The Deathworlders are made of rubber. This was going to be a very long class. Professor Quill, bless his 4 hearts, was trying his absolute best to maintain normalcy. He guided us through the standard Galactic Academy stretching routine, a carefully designed sequence that accommodated the widest possible range of species anatomies. These were stretches that had been tested, refined, and approved by medical professionals from 60 different worlds. Safe stretches. Reasonable stretches. Jamie was making them look like a light breeze. Next, we'll move into a spinal rotation, Professor Kill announced, demonstrating with his own flexible Horthax torso. Rotate your upper body approximately 45 degrees to each side. This promotes flexibility in your central support structure. I managed about 30 degrees before my vertebrae started making concerning clicking sounds. Rez, with his segmented Clinthian spine, did slightly better. Vix didn't even attempt it, their species having no rotational capacity whatsoever in their gelatinous frame. Jamie rotated a full 90 degrees, then kept going. Her upper body swiveled so far around that she was looking directly behind herself, and I swear on all 3 of my ancestors' graves, she smiled and waved at the students behind her. While her hips still faced forward, her torso had just decided that standard anatomical limitations were optional. That's not how spines work, Scylla hissed, their breathing apparatus fluttering with distress. That's not how any of this works. But it did work, apparently, if you were built by a planet that considered reasonable structural integrity to be for quitters. Excellent flexibility, Jamie, Professor Kill said weakly. Perhaps you could demonstrate the standard range for the benefit of, for anatomical comparison purposes. Oh sure, Jamie said cheerfully, rotating back to center. Then she only turned 45 degrees, matching the original instruction perfectly. Like she had a built-in protractor, like casual physics-defying rotation was just her default state, and she had to consciously remember to tone it down for us fragile mortals. The next stretch involved reaching overhead with our primary manipulator limbs. Simple enough. I extended my 3 arms upward, feeling the pleasant pull in my shoulder joints. Standard stuff. Jamie reached up, and her shoulders made this rolling motion that I can only describe as deeply unsettling. Her arms extended fully, then somehow extended further. like her bones were telescoping, her hands clasped together above her head. And then, because apparently the universe has a sense of humor and that sense of humor hates me specifically, she bent backwards. Not a little backwards, lean. Backwards. Her spine curved into an arch that would make a suspension bridge jealous. Her hands touched the floor behind her, and she just held the position like this was normal, like gravity and structural mechanics were merely suggestions that she'd politely declined to follow. "Professor," Vic squeaked, their bioluminescence now strobing in panic patterns, "is she broken? Should we call medical?" "I'm fine," Jamie called out, her voice somehow completely normal despite being upside down and folded in ways that violated several laws of physics I'd studied last semester. "This is just a backbend. It's pretty common in human yoga." Yoga. They had a name for this deliberate skeletal horror. They did it on purpose. Regularly. She straightened back up, rolled her shoulders, which made several popping sounds that caused half the class to flinch, and smiled like she hadn't just demonstrated that humans were apparently boneless when convenient. "Moving on," Professor Kill said, and I'd never heard him sound quite so desperate to change subjects. "Let's try some standing balance poses. Lift one ambulatory limb and hold position for 20 counts." I lifted one of my 3 legs, wobbled slightly, and found my balance. Perfectly adequate performance. Rez managed it easily with his 6 limbs providing plenty of backup support. Even Vic's, despite their gelatinous nature, achieved a stable single-point stance. Jamie lifted one leg, brought her foot up to her opposite knee, and stood there on one leg like she'd been doing it since birth. Which, given what I'd read about human child development, she probably had. Then, because the universe still hated me, she closed her eye. Standing on one leg, eyes closed, not wobbling even slightly. Humans had internal balance systems that involved fluid-filled canals in their skulls. I remembered from my panicked research. Sophisticated organic gyroscopes that could compensate for movement in 3-dimensional space. They'd evolved this to chase prey across uneven terrain, to throw projectiles with accuracy, to be persistence hunters who never ever lost their balance or their target. "This is fine," I whispered to myself, watching Jamie stand there with impossible stability. "This is a normal gym class with a normal student who just happens to be a precision-balanced pursuit predator. Totally fine." Rez leaned over, nearly losing his own balance. "Kellex, I've been thinking, maybe our ancestors were right to stay in the trees and avoid ground-based predators." "Your ancestors lived underwater," I pointed out. "And they had the right idea," he shot back. Professor Kill clapped his hands together, the sound echoing through the gymnasium. "Excellent work, everyone. Now, let's move into some dynamic stretches. We'll do leg swings. Swing your ambulatory limb forward and back in a controlled motion, about knee height. Knee height. A reasonable safe range of motion." I swung my leg forward. It went up maybe 45 degrees. Physics, biology, and common sense all agreed this was appropriate. Jamie swung her leg forward, and it went straight up past her head, completely vertical. Her toes pointed at the ceiling while she stood casually on the other leg, hands on her hips, like this was just basic geometry. Then she swung it back behind her, equally high, with the same disturbing ease. "Nope," Vix announced, and simply walked off the gym floor toward the rest zone. "Nope, nope, nope. I'm out. I'll take the failing grade. I'm not staying in a room where someone can kick their own head from behind." Professor Kill didn't even try to stop them. Jamie paused mid-swing, her legs still extended in a position that made my joints ache just looking at it. "Did I do something wrong? I can stop if this is too much." No, you're doing perfectly well," Professor Kill assured her, lying through his teeth with admirable dedication to his teaching duties. "Please, continue. Everyone else, just work within your own comfortable range." My comfortable range felt insultingly limited compared to what Jamie's species considered basic mobility. Humans had joint flexibility that would make professional contortionists from most species weep with envy. And this wasn't even a particularly flexible human according to my research. This was just standard Deathworlder construction. We continued through several more stretches. Each one revealed new and horrifying aspects of human anatomy. Their hips rotated in ways that seemed to involve extra dimensions. Their ankles flexed at angles that should have required medical intervention. At one point, Jamie casually placed her palms flat on the floor without bending her knees, and Scylla made a sound like a deflating balloon. "Remember, class," Professor Kuhl said, his voice strained. "Flexibility varies greatly between species. Do not compare yourself to others. Work at your own pace." Easy for him to say. He wasn't watching his entire understanding of biological limitations get systematically demolished by a cheerful human who thought backbends were casual warm-up activities. Jamie, for her part, seemed genuinely oblivious to the existential crisis she was causing. She stretched, smiled, occasionally asked if she was doing things correctly, and remained absolutely friendly throughout the entire ordeal, which somehow made it worse. She wasn't trying to intimidate anyone. This was just normal for her. We were being outperformed by someone who wasn't even trying. "All right, class," Professor Kill finally announced, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "Warm-up complete. Let's move on to strength training exercises." Strength training. With a human. A species that evolved to throw spears hard enough to kill large animals from a distance. Rez looked at me. I looked at Rez. We both looked at the exit where Vix had fled. Smart student at Vix. The strength training section of our gymnasium was, in my opinion, the single greatest achievement of modern galactic engineering. Individual gravity chambers, each roughly 3 meters cubed, that could be calibrated to match any species' homeworld conditions. Want to lift weights in 0.25 gravities? Done. Prefer a robust 0.6 environment? No problem. The system was elegant, safe, and designed by people who understood that not everyone came from planets trying to actively crush them. Professor Kill gestured toward the chambers with obvious pride. "Everyone select a chamber and calibrate it to your preferred training gravity. Remember, we're focusing on sustainable resistance exercise, not maximum capacity. This is about building strength over time, not injuring yourselves trying to impress anyone." That last part was definitely directed at Torvik, a Hantian student who had strained his entire back segment last semester trying to lift above his weight class. Literally. I headed for Chamber 7, my usual spot, and programmed it for 0.4 gravities. Really a prime standard, comfortable, familiar, and well within my capabilities. Through the transparent walls I could see Rez setting his to 0.35, while Scylla went even lower at 0.28. Her Drenthian physiology was built for a light gravity world with thick atmosphere, and even 0.3 made her breathing labored. Jamie approached Chamber 4, right next to mine. Perfect. Just perfect. I'd have a front row seat to whatever fresh horror was about to unfold. She studied the control panel with interest, her fingers hovering over the settings. "Professor Kill, what's the maximum gravity setting on these chambers?" The entire gymnasium went quiet. Everyone stopped programming their chambers to hear the answer. Professor Kill's tail did that nervous twitch again. "The chambers can safely generate up to 0.9 standard gravities. That's generally considered the upper limit for training purposes across known species. Why do you ask?" "Oh," Jamie said casually, like she was commenting on the weather and not about to shatter our entire understanding of reasonable planetary conditions. "Earth's gravity is about 0.98 standard. I was just wondering if I could set it close to home levels. 0.98. The silence that followed could have suffocated stars. "I'm sorry," Rez said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did you say 0.98? As in almost full standard gravity?" "Yeah," Jamie confirmed, still smiling that friendly smile. "Earth's a bit on the heavy side, I guess. Is that a problem?" "A problem?" She asked if living on a planet that would pancake most species was a problem. Professor Kill had gone very still. "Jamie, most training protocols recommend working at 70 to 80% of home gravity for safety and endurance. Perhaps you should start at, say, 0.7. "I mean, I can," Jamie said agreeably, "but I'm used to Earth normal. I'd actually feel kind of floaty at 0.7, like being underwater but without the water." She was used to it. She'd spent her entire life in gravity that was nearly at the maximum safety threshold of our equipment. This was her normal. Her casual everyday existence involved fighting against a gravitational pull that would hospitalize most of us. Let's start conservative," Professor Kill suggested, and I'd never heard him sound quite so much like he was negotiating with a volatile explosive. 0.7 for today. "We can gradually increase as you acclimate to the gymnasium environment." Jamie shrugged. "Sure, sounds good." She programmed her chamber for 0.7 gravities, stepped inside and immediately started doing jumping jacks. Jumping jacks. In 0.7 gravities. Like it was light morning exercise. I stared through the transparent walls of my chamber, watching her bounce up and down with cheerful energy, while I struggled to pick up a 5-unit weight bar in my comfortable 0.4 environment. The difference in our baseline capabilities was so vast it was almost philosophical. "This is absurd," I muttered, curling my weight bar with trembling arms. This is completely absurd. Torvik, the Hunthian who'd injured himself last semester, had apparently learned nothing from that experience. He'd set his chamber to 0.5, higher than his homeworld's 0.42, and was watching Jamie with what I can only describe as competitive intensity. This was going to end badly. I could feel it in all three of my leg joints. Jamie finished her jumping jacks and moved to the weight rack inside her chamber. She selected what looked like a 20-unit bar, positioned it across her shoulders and proceeded to do squats. Deep squats. Her legs bent until her thighs were parallel to the ground. Then she straight down and up, in 0.7 gravities, with 20 units of additional mass. My 5-unit bar suddenly felt very heavy in my hands. That's not possible, Scylla wheezed from her 0.28 chamber, where she was carefully lifting a 3-unit weight. The structural load on her leg bones alone should be, the calculations don't, she shouldn't be able to. Jamie finished her set of squats, 15 repetitions, and didn't even look winded. She set the bar down, stretched her arms overhead with more of that unsettling joint flexibility, and selected a heavier weight, a 30-unit bar. Oh no, Rez moaned from his chamber. Oh no, no. She lifted it, pressed it overhead, her arms extended fully, holding 30 units of mass in 0.7 gravities, and she just stood there, stable, controlled, like the laws of physics had personally signed a waiver for her species. Torvik, watching this display with his 3 eyes wide, made a decision that I immediately recognized as catastrophic. He increased his chamber's gravity to 0.6 and reached for a 15-unit bar. Torvik, don't, I called out, but it was too late. He lifted the bar, attempted to press it overhead like Jamie had done, and made it approximately halfway before his arms started shaking. His back segment wobbled, his leg supports trembled. Torvik, put it down, Professor Kill shouted, rushing toward his chamber. Torvik, bless his competitive heart and curse his terrible decision-making skills, tried to complete the press. His arms gave out. The bar fell. Torvik yelped and he collapsed backward into the safety netting that, thank the stars, was standard in all chambers precisely for moments like this. The netting caught him. The bar clattered harmlessly to the padded floor. Torvik lay there tangled in safety mesh, wheezing but uninjured. Jamie immediately stopped her exercise, her face shifting to genuine concern. Oh my gosh, is he okay? Should I get help? He's fine, Professor Kull assured her, helping Torvik out of the netting while giving him a look that promised a very stern conversation later. Just overestimated his capabilities. I wanted to lift like the human, Torvik gasped, his translator struggling with his labored breathing. Seemed reasonable. Nothing about human strength is reasonable by our standards, Professor Quill said firmly. Class, let me be absolutely clear. Do not under any circumstances attempt to match Jamie's performance levels. Her species evolved under conditions that would be considered an extreme training environment for most of you. Work within your own capabilities. Jamie looked genuinely distressed. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make anyone feel like they had to keep up with me. I can exercise in a private chamber if this is causing problems. No, Professor Kill said quickly, probably realizing that separating the human from the group would defeat the entire purpose of the integration program. You're doing nothing wrong, Jamie. Everyone else just needs to remember that comparison is the thief of joy, especially when comparing across species. I watched Jamie return to her workout, now looking more self-conscious. She selected a lighter weight, probably trying to be less intimidating, but even her lighter weight was still heavier than anything I could manage. She moved with practiced efficiency, each exercise demonstrating the casual strength of a species that had spent millions of years evolving on a planet with crushing gravity. Meanwhile, I was still curling my 5-unit bar, my arms burning with effort, wondering how evolution had created such a massive gap in baseline physical capabilities. Rez's voice came through the chamber communication system. Kelix, I've decided something important. What's that? If humans ever decide they want to conquer the galaxy, we should just let them. Fighting back seems pointless. I couldn't argue with his logic. Jamie finished another set, smiled through the transparent wall at those of us watching, and gave a friendly thumbs up, a human gesture meaning approval or encouragement. We all flinched. She was trying to be nice, and we were flinching at friendly gestures. This was our life now. This was gym class, with a Deathworlder. Professor Kill eventually called time on the strength training segment. Jamie stepped out of her chamber looking barely affected by her workout, while the rest of us emerged looking like we'd survived a natural disaster. Great job, everyone, Professor Kill said, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining teacher enthusiasm. Let's take a brief hydration break before we move to endurance training. Endurance training. With a persistence hunter. I looked at Rez. Rez looked at me. We both considered joining Vix in the rest zone and accepting our failing grades. But we didn't. Because apparently we had just enough pride left to choose potential physical collapse over academic defeat. Barely. After the gravity chamber incident, which had left Torvik in the medical observation area with wounded pride and strained back segments, Professor Kill decided we needed something simple, something low risk, something that couldn't possibly result in anyone attempting to match Deathworlder's strength levels and ending up in safety netting. We'll finish today's session with a basic endurance assessment, he announced, gesturing to the track that circled the gymnasium's perimeter. Nothing strenuous, just a simple running evaluation. Each species will complete laps appropriate to your cardiovascular capacity. Porthene students 2 laps, Clinthians 3 laps, Frelians 4 laps, and so on. Simple, he said, simple, like the word had any meaning anymore. The track was standard Galactic Academy regulation, 400 meters per lap, with a beautifully cushioned surface designed to accommodate everything from Hunthian leg supports to Drenthian pseudopods. I'd run it dozens of times, always finishing my 4 required laps in a respectable if not impressive time. My 3 legs were built for stability, not speed, but I could maintain a decent pace. Jamie, Professor Kill said, consulting his datapad with visible trepidation. According to the human physiological data the council provided, I should have you complete, perhaps 6 laps to start. 6 works, Jamie agreed cheerfully. That's only 2.4 kilometers, pretty short, but I'm good with whatever you think is appropriate. Short. She called 6 laps short. My 4 laps always left me winded, and she considered 6 laps a light warm-up distance. We lined up at the starting mark, a somewhat chaotic arrangement of different species with wildly different running styles. Scylla, whose Drenthian physiology was absolutely not built for running, looked resigned to her slow 2-lap fate. Rez stretched his 6 legs with the careful deliberation of someone preparing for mild suffering. I flexed my 3 legs and tried not to think about the human standing casually beside us, probably operating at a fraction of her actual capacity just to avoid terrorizing everyone further. Begin when ready, Professor Kill called out. Remember, this is an assessment, not a competition. Pace yourselves. We started. Scylla immediately fell into what could generously be called a brisk waddle, her methane breather working overtime. Rez managed a decent scuttling pace on his multiple legs. I found my rhythm, a steady 3-legged gait that I could theoretically maintain for the required distance. Jamie started running, and I immediately understood why humans had dominated their planet's food chain. Her movement was wrong. Not wrong in the sense of incorrect, but wrong in the deeply unsettling way that predator locomotion always appears to prey species. She didn't scuttle or waddle or hop. She had a smooth rolling gait where one leg swung forward while the other pushed off, her whole body moving in this rhythmic, efficient motion. Her arms swung in counterbalance. Her breathing fell into a steady pattern. Everything about her movement screamed optimization, like millions of years of evolution had sanded away every inefficiency until only perfect pursuit mechanics remained. And she was slow, deliberately, obviously slow, holding back to a gentle pace that probably felt like standing still to her. I completed my first lap, breathing already getting labored. Scylla had finished her 2 laps and collapsed dramatically on a rest bench. Rez was on his second lap, maintaining pace but clearly working for it. Jamie completed her first lap like she just stood up from a chair. No heavy breathing, no visible effort, just that same disturbing efficiency around and around the track. By my 3rd lap, my legs were burning. My twin hearts were pounding. I could feel the familiar ache of muscles being asked to perform beyond their comfort zone. Jamie was on her 4th lap, still moving at that same steady pace, still breathing normally, still looking like she could maintain this forever. Because she could. That was the horrifying realization crystallizing in my oxygen-deprived brain. Humans were persistence hunters. I'd read about it, but reading and witnessing were entirely different experiences. They didn't chase prey by being faster. They chased prey by never stopping, by following at this exact same steady pace for hours, for days if necessary, until whatever they were hunting literally collapsed from exhaustion. I finished my 4th lap and immediately bent over, gasping for air, my legs trembling. Rez finished his 3 laps and joined me in the universal position of cardiovascular distress. Jamie was on her 5th lap. Her pace hadn't changed. Not faster, not slower, exactly the same rhythm she'd stat with. She's not getting tired, Rez wheezed beside me, his translator crackling with his labored breathing. Kelix, she's not getting tired at all. I know, I managed between gasps. How is that possible? We've been running for what, 10 minutes? She should be showing some sign of fatigue. Persistence hunters, I said, watching Jamie round the turn with mechanical consistency. They don't get tired. They just keep going. Jamie completed her 6th lap and instead of stopping kept running. Professor Kill noticed immediately. Jamie, you've completed your assigned distance. You can stop now. Oh, I know, Jamie called back, not even slightly winded. I'm just going to do a few more laps to actually get my heart rate up. This is a really nice track. Do you mind? She asked if he minded her continuing to run after completing an assessment that had left the rest of us in various states of respiratory crisis. Well, I suppose if you're feeling comfortable, you may continue, Professor Kill said weakly. Comfortable. She was comfortable. We watched, those of us who'd finished our required laps, as Jamie just kept running. Lap 7, lap 8, that same exact pace, that same efficient stride, no slowdown, no struggle, just perpetual motion given biological form. This is how they hunted, I said quietly, the full horror of it sinking in, on Earth. Before technology, they'd pick an animal and just follow it. Not fast enough to catch it immediately, just fast enough to keep it in sight, and they'd follow it until it overheated, until its muscles gave out, until it physically couldn't run anymore. Then they'd walk up and kill it while it lay there too exhausted to fight back. Rez made a small distressed sound. That's absolutely horrifying. And effective, I added. Terrifyingly effective. Lap 9, lap 10. Jamie's ponytail swung in rhythm with her steps. Her breathing was elevated now, actually working but still controlled, still sustainable. She was finally getting a workout at a distance that would have hospitalized most species. Around the gymnasium, the rest of the class had gone silent, watching the human run with the kind of morbid fascination usually reserved for natural disasters. This was what a Deathworld predator looked like when exercising. Not explosive speed, not overwhelming strength in brief bursts, just relentless, unstoppable endurance. The ability to keep moving long after everything else had collapsed. Professor Quill checked his chronometer nervously. Jamie, we're approaching the end of class time. Oh, sorry, Jamie said, and actually stopped running. Lap 11 partially complete. She jogged over to where we were all recovering, barely sweating, breathing only slightly elevated. Got a bit carried away. Running helps me think, you know? No. We didn't know. Running helped us collapse, not think. Excellent. Excellent work today, everyone, Professor Kill announced, sounding like he'd aged several cycles in the past hour. Class dismissed. Remember to hydrate and rest appropriately. Jamie grabbed her water container and took a long drink, then smiled at the rest of us. That was fun. Same time next session, same time. She wanted to do this again, on purpose, voluntarily. I looked at Rez. Rez looked at me. We both looked at the exit where Vix had fled earlier, and for the first time I truly understood their wisdom. We had gym class twice a week, with a human who considered 11 laps a light workout. My academic career had never seemed so fragile. Part 6, Cool Down and Revelation. The cool down period involved lying on padded mats while Professor Kill guided us through breathing exercises designed to lower our heart rates and prevent muscle cramping. Most of the class looked like they'd survived a planetary evacuation. I was flat on my back, my 3 legs sprawled at awkward angles, focusing on the simple act of getting oxygen into my lungs. Jamie sat cross-legged on her mat looking refreshed, actually refreshed, like the past hour had been a pleasant spa experience rather than a comprehensive demonstration of Deathworlder physical superiority. So Jamie, Professor Kuhl said, clearly trying to salvage some educational value from the day's chaos. Do you engage in physical fitness activities regularly on Earth? Oh yeah, Jamie said brightly. I try to run every morning before classes, hit the gym maybe 3 or 4 times a week. Nothing too intense, just enough to stay healthy, you know? Nothing too intense. She called this nothing too intense. Rez raised one trembling arm from his mat. Wait, you do this voluntarily, when it's not required for education? Sure, Jamie said. Like this was the most reasonable thing in the galaxy. Exercise is fun. It's a great stress reliever. Plus, you know, endorphins and all that. Makes you feel good. Your body releases pleasure chemicals when you exhaust yourself, Scylla asked, their voice muffled by the mat they'd face planted into. That seems counterintuitive. Humans are very good at finding entertainment in suffering, I muttered, finally getting my breathing under control. Jamie laughed, apparently taking that as a compliment. I mean, when you put it that way, it does sound kind of weird, but honestly, I haven't been working out as much since I got to the academy. I'm probably pretty out of shape compared to how I was back home. The gymnasium went silent again. That special kind of silence that occurs when someone says something so fundamentally reality-breaking that language temporarily stops functioning. Out of shape, Rez repeated slowly. You, Jamie Chen, who just ran 11 laps without stopping, who can fold yourself in half, who casually lifts weights in 0.7 gravities, you think you're out of shape? Well, yeah, Jamie said, oblivious to the existential crisis she was triggering. Back on Earth I was training for a half marathon. That's, 21 kilometers. I was running that distance like 3 times a week. Now I'm barely hitting 10 kilometers when I do cardio, and don't even get me started on my strength training routine. I used to bench press 60 kilos. Now I'm lucky if I'm maintaining 40. 60 kilos. She used to lift 60 kilos. For fun. As a hobby. While also running distances that would require emergency medical transport for most species. And that's nothing compared to actual athletes, Jamie continued, somehow making things worse. Olympic runners on Earth, they do 40-50 kilometers regularly. Weightlifters can press like 200 kilos or more. I'm super average by human standards, honestly. Average. She was average. This terrifying display of endurance and strength was what humans considered mediocre performance. Professor Kill had given up trying to look professionally composed. He just sat there, his tail completely still, staring at Jamie with the expression of someone fundamentally reconsidering their understanding of biological possibility. Well, he finally said, I think we've all learned a lot about cross-species physiological variance today. That was one way to put it. Another way would be that we'd learned humans were walking nightmares of optimization and we were somehow expected to share gymnasium space with them twice weekly. Twice weekly. The realization hit me like a cargo shuttle. This wasn't a one-time ordeal. This was my life now. Every 4th and 7th day of the cycle, I would report to this gymnasium and be reminded of my species' profound physical inadequacy compared to a persistence hunter from a gravity well that could crush most civilizations. Jamie stood up, stretched with more of that casual joint flexibility that shouldn't exist, and smiled at all of us still lying on our mats like survivors of a natural disaster. Thanks for being so welcoming, everyone. I know my physiology is probably kind of weird for you all. I really appreciate you letting me join the class. Letting her. Like we'd had a choice. Like the Galactic Academy's integration program had consulted us before deciding to introduce a Deathworlder into physical education. But looking at her genuine smile, her friendly demeanor, the way she'd immediately shown concern when Torvik fell, I had to admit something uncomfortable. Jamie wasn't trying to intimidate anyone. She wasn't showing off or being aggressive. She was just existing in her normal state, which happened to be absolutely terrifying by everyone else's standards. She was, despite everything, actually kind of nice, which somehow made it worse. I could handle a scary human, but a nice, friendly, apologetic human who could probably chase down a cargo transport on foot and then lift it overhead, that was a special kind of psychological warfare. Same time next session? Jamie asked cheerfully, heading toward the locker rooms. Assuming we survive until then, I whispered to Rez. He didn't laugh. Neither of us were joking. I pulled myself off the mat, gathered my belongings on shaking legs, and made my way toward the exit. My muscles were already starting to ache. Tomorrow would be worse. I'd be sore in places I didn't know could get sore, and in 3 days I'd be back here. Back in this gymnasium with Jamie Chen, average human who considered our maximum effort her light warm-up. Somewhere in the distance I heard Vix's voice from the rest area asking if class was over and if it was safe to come out yet. Smart student, that Vix. The smartest one here, really. I limped toward the showers, already dreading 4th day of next cycle, wondering if there was any possible way to develop sudden onset academic interests that didn't involve physical education. Probably not. I was stuck with this. Stuck with gym class. Stuck with a Deathworlder who ran for pleasure and thought backbends were casual stretches. My name is Kelix of Vrelia Prime, And I have somehow found myself in the most physically demanding situation of my entire academic career, not because of increased requirements or harder standards, but because the Galactic Academy decided to let a human join our gym class. And she's really genuinely nice about it, which is absolutely the worst part. See you all next session. Assuming my cardiovascular system holds out that long.